The need to know what religion Minecraft is clear and essential. But we're not concerned with what religion Steve is, because quite frankly, a Christian Minecraft player can build a cross. A Muslim Minecraft player can play Halal Minecraft. It's really up to the player, not specific to Steve. What we're far more concerned with is the villagers and the illagers, as these both exist in Minecraft and clearly practice some type of religion. The question is, what real-world religion does it most closely represent? We're going to be doing some process of elimination to see if we can't figure that out. Starting off, we have one villager that's going to really help us narrow things down, and that is the butcher. Now, the butcher has two really important trades. The first one is his pork trade, and the second one is his beef trade. Now, if we take a look at the pork, the first thing that we're going to notice is that pork actually is going to forbid Islam and Judaism, as both of these religions don't allow the consumption of pork. Similarly, beef is not permitted in Hinduism. So, with just the butcher and just these trades, we've actually knocked out 3 of these 8 major categories. Additionally, the fact that meat is eaten at all makes religions like Buddhism and Taoism less likely, as veganism and vegetarianism can often be found in these religions. However, it is not required, and there are still many who will practice these religions without being vegans or vegetarians. Next up, we need to talk about another villager, the cleric. We're not as concerned with the trades, but his name. A cleric, by definition, is a priest or religious leader, especially a Christian or Muslim one. Since we know that villagers have religious leaders, it makes atheism right out. And because the definition does specify that it's more likely to be a Christian, that's one point in the favor of Christianity. Next up, we're going to talk about an old structure from Minecraft. That's the church. In the game files, this is actually labeled as the church, and in fact where the cleric finds its workstation. Now, it is important to note that in the Village and Pillage update, Mojang actually did change it to be called the Temple in all of its biome variants, but it's still the same structure, and since most of the game's life cycle it's been called a church, I think it's still fair to call it a church. So, because the church is sort of an exclusive term for Christianity, that's going to make other religions, such as paganism or polytheism, much less likely, and it's going to add another point to Christianity. So let's talk about Christianity. Christianity can largely be split up into 4 major categories. First one is going to be the Orthodox, most known for their big beards and cool icons. Somewhat similar, we have the Roman Catholics, known for the Vatican and, of course, the Pope. These two groups split off from each other in the year 1054. The Protestants are the next group, who then they split off from the Roman Catholic Church in the year 1517. Mostly known for the work of Martin Luther, as well as various different belief systems that still all classify under Protestant. The most diverse group, and probably the one you've heard the least about, is the Restorationist movement. This consists of groups such as Jehovah's Witnesses, the Church of Latter-day Saints, or more commonly known as Mormons, as well as sometimes Quakers or other groups. Usually, this term is someone who believes that the true church has died and fallen away, and they are the true restoration of the true church. An important clarification is that the first 3 categories all believe in the Trinity. The Restorationists usually don't, although there are some that do. Vocab alert! So, when it comes to icons, I did mention them with Orthodox, but they're not exclusive to them. In fact, any group that likes icons and uses them in worship is known as an iconophile. However, any group that doesn't like the use of images in worship is an iconoclast. This doesn't mean they can't use images at all, it just means they won't use them for worship. Now, going back to those 4 categories that we talked about earlier, both Catholic and Orthodox are iconophiles. They use images in worship, or at least are allowed to. Protestants and Restorationists usually, but not always, are iconoclasts, meaning they don't use images in worship. Now, if we actually look at the Minecraft villages, you won't see any use of images whatsoever. This isn't true for other civilizations, such as the Illagers, who clearly do use icons. So it's pretty safe to assume that the villagers are iconoclasts. Meaning, if that's the case, then what we're probably dealing with is either a restorationist or a Protestant tradition. To delineate between these two, we're going to be talking about the cross, as both of these traditions tend to use the cross a bit differently. In the Protestant tradition, crosses are everywhere. They're common in churches, and not just churches, but even homes. It's pretty common to have these decorations all over the place. Restorationists, on the other hand, don't seem to use the cross nearly as much. Now, this does vary group to group. For instance, the Jehovah's Witnesses won't use the cross because they believe Jesus was not crucified on a cross, but rather a stake or an upright pillar. Latter-day Saints, or Mormons, don't use the cross all that often because they believe the atonement was largely done in the garden, not on the cross. More than that, they like to emphasize the living Christ, not Christ on the cross. There are some groups that do use the cross, but it's much less common in the Restorationists. So I think it's safe to assume that whatever the villagers are, they are some type of Restorationist. But which one? There's a lot of options, and even just what you're seeing on screen doesn't really classify every single Restorationist movement. But from the evidence that we're about to get into, I think it's pretty clear that the villagers are Christian Scientists. Now, an important bit of clarification. Christian Scientists are not Scientologists. They're not related at all. They both have the name, but there's just simply no overlap between these two groups. So, what are the Christian Scientists then? Well, that really comes back down to one woman, Mary Baker Eddy. You see, this movement really got its start because Mary Baker Eddy slipped on some ice and fell, injuring herself. She then opened the Bible to a page of Jesus healing somebody and believed that this was the purpose of the Bible, to help achieve physical healing. Now, going back to Minecraft, both ice and fall damage exist in Minecraft. So that means there's a real possibility that there is a villager, Mary Baker Eddy, because both of what we needed to have her exist in Minecraft. Well, what about their beliefs? Do they mirror what we see with the Minecraft villagers? Well, to start off, the primary problem with reality for the Christian Scientists is physical illness. And they really see the world as not actually real, at least not the material bit, but actually an illusion. So the solution is growing in knowledge to overcome this illusion, which leads to physical healing. Now, let's look quickly at their practices. Well, their services involve reading from the pastor. However, unlike in most normal Christian services, the pastor is not a person. Rather, it is either the Bible or Science and Health with Key to the Scriptures, which is the primary text for the Christian Scientists. So they actually view their pastor as a book. Similarly, their primary site that you're going to see is not necessarily a church, but rather a reading room, which essentially is a library. Now, switching back over to the villagers, do we see this evident in the Minecraft villagers? I would say yes, we really do. Looking at the primary doctrine of gaining knowledge to gain physical healing, look at how trading works with a Minecraft villager. When you trade with them, they can go up in their ranks from things like journeyman to master. This is representative of how they are gaining knowledge like you would in a trade. So what happens when you actually level up these villagers? Well, they get the regeneration effect, meaning that as they gain knowledge, they also gain physical healing, just like what we saw with the Christian Scientist belief. Additionally, in Minecraft, every single village archetype has some form of library, or in other words, a reading room. Even more important than that, we see how books and magic really correspond in Minecraft. Quite frankly, if you want to access the supernatural, you need books. That's how you craft an enchanting table or get enchanted books. The villagers seem to understand this because just look at the librarian. You see, the librarian is clearly aware of the power of books because he is able to buy books and quills from the player. He values it. At the same time, he is able to enchant books for the player. So clearly, whatever the librarian is doing, he is using books to interact with the supernatural, very similar to what we see in the Christian Sciences. So, what about this cross? I said earlier that restorationists don't really use the cross and use this as an example because we don't see crosses in villages. Well, the thing is, while the symbol for Christian Sciences include a cross, not much else does. I've actually personally been to the mother church that you're seeing images of now, and other than their symbol, crosses are not a common symbol within Christian Sciences. This actually does get into what they believe about the cross, because if you actually read through their texts, most Christians will say that the reason the cross is important is because that is where Jesus died to atone for the sins of mankind. Whereas Christian scientists will usually say that the cross is usually just an example of love. It doesn't actually do anything, it just shows love. And they can't rely on it to actually receive what Christ has promised for them. So because the cross is so much less important for this group, you don't really see it in their decorations. So all that being said, it seems pretty clear that the villagers are Christian scientists. This is, of course, vital information that's going to dramatically change the way that you play. Let me know in the comments how this new information is going to change how you approach playing Minecraft. And make sure to subscribe and stay around for part 2, where we're going to discuss the other race, the Illagers, and see what real-world religion most accurately represents these guys.